As the ghostly figure walked slowly across the lake's surface towards us, we knew we had to escape, but the haunting image of the ghost fisherman would stay with us forever. My friend Jake and I had always loved fishing, and when we heard about a remote lake known for its deep waters and dark legends, we couldn't resist the adventure. The lake was said to be haunted, but we laughed off the stories, eager for a peaceful day of fishing. We arrived at dawn, the mist still clinging to the water's surface. The tranquility of the lake was mesmerizing, and we quickly set up our gear, ready to spend the day enjoying our favorite pastime. As the morning passed, we enjoyed the quiet and the occasional tug on our lines. Around noon, I glanced across the lake and noticed an older man standing on the opposite shore. He was dressed in old-fashioned fishing clothes, his eyes fixed on us. It was a bit odd, but we didn't think much of it. Jake and I waved to the man, but he didn't respond. He just stood there, watching us with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. We shrugged it off, joking that he must be a local who didn't appreciate outsiders. We continued fishing, but the uneasy feeling lingered. Every time I looked up, the man was still there, motionless, staring at us. The atmosphere around the lake seemed to shift, growing heavier and more oppressive. As the afternoon wore on, I realized the man was no longer on the shore. He had vanished without a trace, and the sense of unease deepened. Jake and I exchanged worried glances, the eerie silence pressing down on us. We decided it was time to pack up and leave. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water. The once tranquil lake now felt ominous, and the legends we had laughed off earlier seemed all too real. As we gathered our gear, a strange feeling of being watched returned. It was as if the man's gaze still lingered, even though he was nowhere to be seen. The air grew colder, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Just as we were about to leave, we heard something moving in the water. At first, we thought it was a fish, but the sound was too deliberate, too heavy. We turned to look and saw the man, now closer, walking slowly across the lake's surface. My heart raced as I realized what we were seeing. The man was walking on the water, his old-fashioned clothes dripping wet, his eyes locked onto us. His movements were slow and deliberate, almost as if he was floating. The sight was both mesmerizing and terrifying. Panic set in. We grabbed our things, our hands shaking, and ran to the car. The image of the ghostly fisherman burned into our minds. Every step felt like we were wading through molasses, the fear making it hard to move. We threw our gear into the car and sped away, the eerie silence following us. The road was dark and winding, but we didn't dare slow down. My mind raced with thoughts of the ghostly figure, wondering if he was still watching us. As we drove, the feeling of being watched didn't fade. The shadows seemed to move, and every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps. It was as if the ghost fisherman was following us, refusing to let us leave in peace. We didn't stop until we reached the nearest town. Only then did we feel a semblance of safety, but the fear still clung to us. The ghostly encounter had shaken us to our core, and we knew we would never return to that lake. When we told the locals about our experience, their reactions were grim. They explained that many years ago, a fisherman had drowned in the lake, and his ghost occasionally appeared to those who ventured too far. Our story matched the tales they had heard, and their somber expressions confirmed our worst fears. The encounter left a lasting mark on us. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the ghost fisherman walking towards us, his eyes filled with an intensity that chilled me to the bone. The lake, once a place of adventure, had become a symbol of fear. We never returned to that lake. The fear and unease from that night followed us, a constant reminder of the ghostly figure we had encountered. Even now, the thought of that lake sends a shiver down my spine, and I can't help but wonder if the ghost fisherman is still there, waiting for his next unsuspecting visitors. If you thought that was terrifying, just wait. The next story is even more chilling. Subscribe now and leave a comment if you're brave enough. As the creature's glowing eyes locked onto ours and its terrible scream echoed through the night, we knew we had to escape, but the haunting memory of the river's dark secret would stay with us forever. We had planned the perfect getaway, a camping trip next to a river famous for its large trout. My friend Mike and I were seasoned campers, and the thought of spending a few days fishing and enjoying the great outdoors was exactly what we needed. The first 2 days were idyllic. The weather was perfect, the fish were biting, and the river provided a serene backdrop for our campsite. We spent our days fishing and our nights around the campfire, sharing stories and enjoying the tranquility of the wilderness. On the third day, our luck seemed to take a strange turn. Mike had hooked a particularly large trout, and as he struggled to reel it in, I stood by, ready to help. The fish fought fiercely, its body gleaming in the sunlight as it thrashed in the water. Suddenly, something caught my eye. There, in the water, was what looked like a hand, grasping the fish and pulling it back towards the depths. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but Mike saw it too. We exchanged a look of horror as we realized that something was down there with us. The realization sent a jolt of fear through us. We pulled with all our might, determined to get the fish out of the water and away from whatever was trying to take it. The struggle intensified, the water churning with the combined efforts of the fish and the unseen force. With a final, desperate yank, we managed to pull the fish onto the shore. But along with it came a creature that defied explanation. It was humanoid in shape, but its skin was covered in scales that glistened in the fading light. Its eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light, and its mouth opened in a scream that chilled us to the bone. The creature was terrifying to behold. Its body was a grotesque combination of human and aquatic features, with long, clawed fingers and webbed feet. It stood on the shore for a moment, its eyes locked onto ours, before letting out another terrible scream. The sound was like nothing we had ever heard, an unearthly wail that seemed to reverberate through the very ground beneath us. In a flash, the creature retreated, moving with a fluid grace that was both mesmerizing and horrifying. It disappeared into the river, leaving us standing there in stunned silence. The fish lay forgotten at our feet, our attention consumed by the terrifying encounter. The shock of what we had just seen left us speechless. We stood there, staring at the spot where the creature had vanished, our minds racing to comprehend what had just happened. The air seemed to grow colder, and the once serene river now felt like a place of lurking danger. We spent the rest of the night on high alert, our senses heightened by fear. Every rustle of leaves, every splash of water made us jump. The creature's scream echoed in our minds, a haunting reminder of the unknown horrors that lurked in the river's depths. We huddled by the campfire, our eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the creature's return. Sleep was impossible. The fear kept us awake, our bodies tense and ready to flee at a moment's notice. We knew we couldn't stay, but the thought of moving through the darkness was equally terrifying. We decided to wait for dawn, hoping that the light of day would offer some protection. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, we wasted no time packing up our campsite. The fear and unease had not diminished with the arrival of daylight. If anything, the creature's presence felt even more menacing in the stark light of morning. We moved quickly, our eyes constantly scanning the river and the surrounding woods. The journey back to our car was tense and silent. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow a potential threat. The river, which had seemed so peaceful and inviting just a few days ago, now felt like a place of malevolent energy. We couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and the memory of the creature's glowing eyes haunted us with every step. When we finally reached our car, we didn't waste any time. We loaded our gear and drove away from the river, the sense of relief palpable as we put distance between ourselves and the campsite. But the fear lingered, a constant reminder of the night's events. In the days that followed, we couldn't stop talking about the encounter. We tried to rationalize what we had seen, but no explanation seemed to fit. The memory of the creature's scaly skin and glowing eyes haunted us, and the sound of its scream echoed in our minds. When we shared our story with a few locals, their reactions were a mix of disbelief and fear. Some said we had encountered a creature from local legend, a guardian of the river that appeared to those who ventured too far. Others simply shook their heads, warning us never to return to that spot. The experience left a deep impression on us. The river, once a place of adventure and relaxation, had become a source of fear. We knew we would never return. The memory of the creature's scream a constant reminder of the unknown horrors that could be lurking just beneath the surface. Even now, the thought of that night sends chills down my spine. The encounter with the creature of the river remains one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. A haunting reminder that some legends are based on more than just imagination. Need to catch your breath? Too bad. The next fright is just around the corner. Subscribe and let us know in the comments how scared you are. As the ghostly figures moved across the deck of the abandoned boat, whispers and footsteps echoing around us, we knew we had to escape, but the haunting image of that eerie vessel would stay with us forever. My father and I had always cherished our ocean fishing trips, the vast expanse of the sea, the thrill of the catch, and the peaceful moments spent together on the water were what we lived for. This particular trip started like any other, with the sun rising over the horizon and the gentle waves lapping against our boat. We had set out early, eager to spend the day fishing and enjoying each other's company. The ocean was calm and the sky was clear, a perfect day for an adventure. Little did we know, this trip would be unlike any other, filled with terror and mystery. As we navigated further from shore, we spotted a boat drifting aimlessly in the distance. It was in terrible condition, with tattered sails and a hull that looked like it had seen better days. Curiosity and concern prompted us to approach the vessel, wondering if someone needed help. Boarding the boat, we immediately noticed signs of a struggle. The deck was littered with broken objects, torn nets, and dark, ominous bloodstains. The eerie silence was broken only by the creaking of the boat as it swayed with the waves. There was no sign of life, but the evidence of violence was clear and unsettling. We called out, hoping for a response, but our voices were swallowed by the emptiness. The atmosphere grew heavier, and an inexplicable sense of dread settled over us. We decided to explore further, hoping to find some clue as to what had happened. As we ventured deeper into the boat, the weather changed abruptly. A thick fog rolled in, enveloping us in a dense, suffocating mist. The temperature dropped, and the air grew damp and cold. Our visibility was reduced to mere feet, and the once gentle sound of the ocean now seemed distant and distorted. Then, the whispers began, soft at first, like the rustle of leaves, but growing louder and more distinct with each passing moment. They seemed to come from all directions, echoing through the fog. We froze, straining to hear, trying to make sense of the disembodied voices. Our fear escalated when we heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps moving around us. The deck creaked under the weight of unseen figures. Panic set in as we realized we were not alone. The whispers grew into a cacophony of voices, some pleading, others angry, all incomprehensible. Desperation took hold, and we decided to return to our boat. But the path back seemed longer, the fog thicker. The whispers and footsteps followed us, closing in. As we neared the edge of the boat, we saw them. Ghostly figures moving on the deck, their forms translucent and shimmering in the mist. The sight was paralyzing. These figures seemed to glide, their eyes hollow and vacant, their movements slow and deliberate. They watched us with an intensity that chilled us to the bone. The whispers became more frantic, as if urging us to leave, to escape the fate that had befallen them. Our panic turned into a frantic scramble. We stumbled and tripped, the oppressive atmosphere making it hard to breathe. The ghostly figures continued to approach, their presence a constant reminder of the unknown horror that had occurred on this boat. We finally reached the edge and jumped back onto our own vessel, our hearts pounding in our chests. We didn't waste a second. My father started the engine, and we moved away as quickly as possible. The fog made navigation difficult, but our fear drove us forward. The whispers and footsteps seemed to follow us, lingering in the air even as we put distance between ourselves and the abandoned boat. Looking back, we saw the ghostly figures standing at the edge of the deck, watching us leave. Their forms seemed to fade into the mist, but their presence was undeniable. The sight sent a final wave of terror through us, and we pushed the boat to its limits, desperate to escape. The journey back to shore felt like an eternity. The fog slowly lifted, but the fear remained. We didn't speak, our minds racing with what we had just experienced. The ocean, once a place of adventure and excitement, had become a realm of nightmares and ghostly apparitions. When we finally reached shore, we reported what we had seen to the authorities. They listened politely but were skeptical. No one believed our story of the abandoned boat, the signs of struggle, and the ghostly figures. To them, it was just another fishing tale. The encounter left a lasting impact on us. The memory of the ghostly figures, the whispers, and the footsteps haunted our dreams. The ocean, once a place of solace, now held a dark and terrifying secret. We made a pact never to venture near that area again, the fear too great to overcome. Even now, the thought of that day sends chills down my spine. The abandoned boat remains a mystery, a ghostly vessel drifting through the fog, waiting for its next unsuspecting visitors. The haunting memory of that encounter stays with us, a reminder that some secrets are best left undisturbed, hidden in the depths of the ocean. Another story, another scream. Get ready for the next terrifying tale. Don't forget to subscribe and tell us which story gave you chills. As the skeletal hand gripped my ankle and pulled me deeper into the darkness of the underwater cave, I fought with every ounce of strength to break free, knowing that my life depended on it. Spearfishing had always been my passion. The thrill of the hunt, the beauty of the underwater world, and the sense of adventure it brought were unmatched. When I discovered a new reef, my excitement was palpable. I couldn't wait to explore it and see what treasures it held beneath the surface. I decided to dive alone, wanting to immerse myself fully in the experience. The water was clear, and the reef was teeming with life. It was the perfect setting for an unforgettable dive. As I descended into the water, the vibrant colors of the reef and the abundance of fish mesmerized me. The underwater world was alive with activity, and I felt a deep sense of peace and wonder. I moved slowly, taking in the sights and enjoying the solitude. But after a while, a strange sensation crept over me. It was as if I was being watched. I paused, scanning my surroundings, but saw nothing unusual. The fish continued to dart around, and the coral swayed gently with the current. I shook off the feeling, attributing it to my imagination, and continued my exploration. The sensation, however, persisted. It was subtle but unmistakable, a prickling awareness that sent chills down my spine. I tried to focus on the beauty around me, but the unease grew stronger with each passing minute. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. As I swam further along the reef, I spotted an underwater cave. Its entrance was dark and foreboding, but curiosity got the better of me. I decided to enter, hoping to uncover hidden wonders. The cave's interior was eerie, with shadows dancing on the walls and the water growing colder. Inside, I found old diving equipment remained scattered on the cave floor. Rusted tanks, broken masks, and torn wetsuits lay in disarray, creating an unsettling scene. The sight sent a shiver through me, and a sense of foreboding settled in my gut. What had happened here? The atmosphere in the cave grew heavier, the silence oppressive. The feeling of being watched intensified, and I could almost hear faint whispers carried by the currents. My heart pounded in my chest, and I began to regret my decision to explore the cave alone. Suddenly, I felt a violent tug on my leg. I looked down in horror to see a skeletal hand gripping my ankle, its bony fingers wrapped tightly around my skin. The hand was connected to a half-submerged figure, its hollow eyes staring up at me from the darkness. A scream bubbled in my throat, but only bubbles escaped. Panic surged through me as I struggled to free myself. I kicked and thrashed, but the grip tightened, pulling me deeper into the cave. My lungs burned, and the need for air became desperate. I fought with every ounce of strength, my vision narrowing as fear threatened to overwhelm me. With a final, frantic effort, I managed to break free. The skeletal hand released its grip, and I swam towards the surface with all my might. The world around me blurred, and my only focus was on reaching the light above. The eerie whispers seemed to follow me, a reminder of the horror I was leaving behind. I burst through the surface, gasping for air and scrambling onto my boat. My hands trembled as I removed my gear, my heart still racing. I glanced at my leg and saw the faint, ghostly finger marks imprinted on my skin. The sight sent a fresh wave of terror through me, and I struggled to calm my frantic thoughts. I sat on the boat, trying to process what had just happened. The fear was still raw, the memory of the skeletal hand vivid in my mind. The peacefulness of the reef had been shattered, replaced by a sense of danger and dread. I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. The decision to leave was easy. The once inviting waters now felt like a trap, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. I started the engine and navigated away from the reef, my eyes constantly scanning the water for any sign of the creature. Back on shore, I recounted my experience to friends and fellow divers. Some were skeptical, others intrigued, but none could explain what I had encountered. The memory of the skeletal hand and the oppressive atmosphere of the cave haunted me, a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the surface. I vowed never to dive alone again, the fear of another encounter too great to ignore. The reef, once a place of wonder, had become a site of nightmares. I avoided that area, the thought of returning sending chills down my spine. Even now, the sensation of being touched by something so macabre still gives me chills. The underwater beauty I once loved is now tinged with a sense of foreboding, and the memory of that skeletal hand gripping my ankle remains one of the most terrifying experiences of my life.